Hello everybody, this is Allie from Stuck on You Crochet, and today we are going to work on making a checkerboard design using Tapestry crochet. If you are following the stitch along for the Stitchwork Scarf, then this is block 2 that we're starting, and I'm going to be sharing the instructions that are shared for that specific project. But if you're just joining to learn how to use tapestry crochet or how to do a checkerboard design, then this tutorial will work for you too. So for this specific block, since we're working it on the Stitchwork Scarf, we're going to be continuing our work up above block 1. So you will need to have block 1 finished, which featured the loop stitch, and you can find that tutorial linked in the comments. Okay, so for our checkerboard design, you're going to need 2 different colors. So I've chosen some pretty high contrasting colors here to make it easy to see. I have a lime green and then a dark purple. And then when we finished our loop stitch, we marked it off with a stitch marker. So you can go ahead and you can take that stitch marker out. And then we're continuing to work with a 5mm hook if you're using a single strand of yarn for your project. So when you take your stitch marker out, we're actually going to pull this last stitch out because I'm going to show you how to work a color change. So make that last loop again. So you should have 3 loops on your hook. And then what we're going to do here is, rather than yarning over with our main color yarn, we're going to pull up our next color. So I'm going to let this tail hang, and I'll grab my next color, and I'm going to finish the stitch with the color that I want to change to. So now I've finished that last loop, but I have my new color on my hook. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to turn the whole thing over. Now, as you work across this row, if you want, you can go over top of these tails to secure them. I still recommend weaving the tails at the end, but if you want to work over them, you can. If you don't, because they're just seems like they're in the way, then you don't have to. But to work the checkerboard, we are going to alternate between colors in our row. So for our pattern, we're going to have 30 total stitches across, and we're going to work 6 stitches in each color, and that will create our blocks. So these are all single crochet stitches, so they're simple stitches, but we're going to work 6 single crochet stitches. And you can see this is what I meant. I'm going over my tails here. And then I'll drop them after a few stitches and then wait to go weave those ends in. So I've got 4, 5, and 6. Now, on my 6th stitch, I need to switch colors. So just like I did before, I'm going to start that 6th stitch, but I'm not going to finish it. So I have 2 loops on my hook, and now I'm going to grab my alternate color yarn. I'm going to draw up a loop, and then I have that color ready to go. I need to carry my green yarn with me because I'm going to have to switch back to that. So as I work these purple stitches, I'm going to work 6 single crochet stitches again, but I'm going to work with the green yarn being carried along with me. Otherwise, if you drop that yarn, if you don't carry it along with you, then you're going to get lines across the back. So if you're working a tapestry crochet project where you don't see the inside, then something like that is fine. But in this case, with a scarf, it's going to have a back, so you want to carry that yarn inside the stitch so you can see that you don't see it here. Now I'm at the 6th stitch in this block. I like to give this first color yarn just a little bit of a tug. You don't want to pull it too tightly, but you also don't want to have a bunch of loops. So I'm going to give it a little tug, and I'm going to finish that 6th stitch with the green color. And now I'm ready to do my next block. So this time I'm going to carry the purple color with me as I work 6 single crochet stitches. And then when I get to that 6th stitch, I'll drop the green and finish the stitch with the purple. Then I'm ready to switch to my next block. So you continue this method back and forth through this entire block where you're switching those colors back and forth. And for this block, because we're switching the stitches because we're switching the colors every 6 stitches, we just carry it along with us the entire time. There are some patterns where if you have very large swaths of space where you are not using a color, then they recommend using bobbins. And a bobbin is just a small amount of yarn that you can pick up and put down so that you don't have to carry it along. Or like if you were, say you were only using the greens on the outside, then you might use bobbins on either side so that you don't have to carry that yarn all the way through the center. So not something that we need to worry about specifically for the Stitchwork Scarf. So now we've gotten to the end here, and you can see I did carry my purple yarn to the end. I don't actually need that color yet, so it's up to you if you want to carry them on either ends. I usually do, just so that it keeps the height of the stitch uniform. If you drop the color, then you might find that the edges are a little bit shorter. So I'm going to turn my project over, and you can see I chained 1. I went ahead and did my first single crochet stitch, and I'm just going right over top that purple yarn again. So here now I'm going to switch colors. I'm going to give this one a little tug. Then I'm going to yarn over, and I'll continue with purple and go over the green. It's normal with this technique to see the color that you're carrying. There are methods that you can use to hide them better if you want, but it's hard when you have highly contrasting colors because it's going to show through just a little bit. If you have 2 colors that are a little more similar in color, then you may not see them quite so much. So I'm using that same technique all the way across this row. Oops. And you can see how I'm tugging just a little bit to keep that strand that I'm carrying, to keep it taut. If you pull it too tight, then you are going to find that this block will warp. If the tension is too tight, it'll get kind of cinched in. That is something that you can fix a little bit with blocking at the end or steaming, but you don't want it to be too tight, or you're going to see that it warps in this section. So try to keep your tension nice and even. So we're at the end of row 2 here. We're going to chain 1 and turn the whole thing over. So as I said, you can see, if you look closely, you can see my purple yarn behind the green, and you can see the green behind the purple here. And like I said, that's just kind of normal. If you didn't want to have any of that color show through, then you would need bobbins for every single section where you wanted to change, and then obviously you'd have ends to weave in each of those blocks. So for me, the color does not bother me enough to have to weave ends at every single block where I color change. But for some people, that might be their preference. So for this row, I'm just doing the same thing, 6 single crochet stitches, and then switching, and then 6 single crochet stitches, and then switching back. So we're going to continue this for 5 rows total. So I'll work my 5 rows and then I'll show you how we're going to switch once we get to the end of our 5 rows. We'll need to switch our colors at that point. So we've finished our green rows, but in the next block of 5 rows, we need purple to be on the end. So on our final stitch, we're going to finish that stitch with our purple, and then we'll chain 1 and turn the project over so that we can begin the next block of stitches with our alternate color. Now you'll continue in the exact same method as before, but as you can see, this will create that checkerboard effect so that you can switch blocks of colors. We carried to the green here, so we will yarn over on the final stitch and switch to the green color. Tapestry crochet does have a tendency to get your yarn very tangled. Especially if you're using more than 2 colors, it's really easy to get it tangled. So I like to keep one that I'm pulling towards the back and then one that I keep towards the front. And in that way, it kind of helps keep it from tangling. So continue to work the rows in this back and forth fashion up until you have 25 rows total. So you should have 5 blocks of or five rows of blocks of stitches. So finish up that and I will come back when I'm at the end of block 2. Okay, so once you get to the end of block 2, you should have something looking similar to this. So you have 25 rows and there's 5 blocks going up the columns and going across the rows. So when you get to the end of row 25, just like we did on block 1, we're going to pull this stitch up and use the stitch marker to block that last stitch. If you have the Stitchwork Scarf pattern and you want to just go ahead to block 3, then you don't need to do this. You can color change on that last stitch. But since we are releasing the blocks one at a time, we're going to block our work off with a stitch marker, and then we will be back for block number 3. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, but hopefully you have a beautiful checkerboard block now. Thanks for joining.